It's finally here. My Zerno Z1 has landed, and it's time to do some unboxing and first impressions. And when I say finally, it has been a 10-month journey from joining the waitlist in January to receiving the grinder in November. And much like anything that builds that level of anticipation over the course of a better part of a year, does mean it has a bit of an upward battle to meet the expectations that come along with waiting so long, on top of all the good press it's had from many early adopters and the Specialty Coffee Association's Best New Product Award. All right, so the first thing that we see is the QR code for the Zerno user guide. Now, I'm a bit torn on the digital-only manual. I do like to have a paper manual on hand, but I do think it's easier to find things in a digital manual. I just like that feel, I guess, of a proper manual in my hand. Of course, as you can see right now, I did order it with the optional Pelican case, which at first feel and movement, it does feel quite a bit more substantial. It feels like a proper hard case compared to some of the other sort of off-brand hard cases I've felt with other machines recently. So that is a bit of a bonus. But before we get into the grinder itself, a quick word from this video's sponsor, Standart Magazine. If you're into coffee, its culture, and learning about the world around it, Standart Magazine is the perfect addition to your brew bar or coffee table. With quarterly releases, they shed light on issues both inside and outside of the cafe, highlighting people who elevate the industry, and deep dives into new ideas around all things coffee. To sweeten the deal even further, each issue also includes a sample of coffee from some of the world's best roasters, to give you the full sensory experience. You really can't beat the combination of fresh coffee and fresh print. So head on over to standartmag.com/Sprometheus, use the link in the description or code Sprometheus at checkout to snag $5 off a subscription for you or as a gift for a friend with a money-back guarantee. And if that's not good enough, you can actually try Standart for just the cost of shipping. There's not a whole lot to lose and a whole lot to gain. All right, so now that you've been sufficiently teased, it's time for a first look at the grinder. And immediately, everything just looks super nice and clean and organized, and I do love that vibe. So it also has a set of its own tools, a 1.5, a 2, a 2.5, and a 3mm wrench, which helps with working on the grinder, I suppose. Also, you have an RDT bottle. It's nice and glass. It looks basically exactly like the one that came with the P64. Also in the box is a cleaning brush, which is basically a standard with most high-end grinders anyway. And these little magnetized handles, which I haven't really quite figured out yet what they're for, but my guess is they're for moving and removing the blind burrs, which are held in by magnets. Also, you have a nice stainless steel, remarkably heavy dosing cup. The base is very heavy, and inside you have the actual dosing chute that will snap onto the grinder a bit later. Also here you have a funnel, which kind of straightforward, but it is a very nice feeling solid metal piece that goes on top of the grinder, I'm assuming. And here I have a piece that I paid for extra. This is the slow feed auger. Inside is the standard medium feed auger. Also, there is different faceplates for the grinder that are wood accents. This is the one I ordered. They actually included another darker wood option because I was hoping there would be a black metal option coming by the time the grinder shipped. So they were kind enough to include the darkest option they have, but we'll see if I can make that work. Also in here is something that I didn't anticipate, and that is a cap for the funnel, which can come in handy, I'm assuming, if it's popcorning up and out. I don't imagine this grinder creates a ton of popcorning, but it's a nice thing to have, and it feels very heavy and well made. Next up in the case, we have the portafilter holder, which is another option that I chose because I'm going to be using this grinder almost exclusively for espresso. All right, so now let's get this thing out of the case. First impressions on holding it, it is just as solid and sturdy as I anticipated. And there are little magnets somewhere, I guess, inside the base. They're not super strong, but they are functional. And of course, the funnel fits in with just an O-ring, so it's just a press in, not like a screw in or anything like that. And further inside the case, underneath the top foam, is the power cable. I guess the grinder, depending on the white or black finish, you get a white or black cable, which is nice. It does kind of drive me nuts when grinders come with a cable that's white or gray when you have a black one or something like that. So just a nice aesthetic choice. Let's click it on. Oh, I don't know if y'all caught that, but there was a good amount of coffee still inside there. So we're going to pop the little dosing chute on, and we're going to kind of take it apart real quick just to look inside, but also to clean it up some because it looks like it maybe wasn't cleaned after testing in the factory before it was shipped out to me. So using their handy tools, we're just going to slip this thing off. And one of the nice things about this grinder too is the removal of this stuff is pretty straightforward, though not quite as straightforward as something like the P64, which is just a twist off, at least the older version of the P64. But as you can see, there is some grinds inside, so we're going to just brush everything out with the included brush and get this thing ready to grind our coffee. And now the moment of truth. These SSP burrs look great. Of course, they are blind, so there's no screws in them. Jury's still out on if that truly matters. It's like really small amount of additional space in terms of the grinding ability, maybe speed of grinding. We'll see if it actually helps particle size distribution. All that stuff is tests TBD, but it looks great. And now it's nice and cleaned up. We'll put it back together. Of course, we're going to do just a quick cleanup as well before we do some grinding of our own. All right, and since we did take it apart, I think it's probably a good thing to go back and try to re-zero it and make sure everything is in line. So turning on the grinder, turning it back until we hit our 0 point or when the burrs chirp. There it is. Just want to keep it very close to that chirping point, not right on it. As the 0, we're going to loosen the screw, which loosens the adjustment knob. And then it also loosens the piece behind the adjustment knob that you can adjust. And so we're just going to move that to the 0 point. Keep it nice and accurate. And then we're going to screw this guy back on. It doesn't need to be super tight according to the manual. So we're just going to give it a little twist. And we're good to go. And we'll give it a double check here in a second. There it is. We're zeroed in, baby. All right, now let's run a little coffee through it to make sure just everything's functioning as it should. Well, I would call that a success. We have a grinder, folks. But finally, now let's brew some espresso. I'm going to choose the gentle and sweet because I like just that nice 6-7 bar pull. I'm going to use this steady state natural sippy falls, which notes of strawberry, blueberry, nougat, and plum. I think it's a pretty unique coffee. Could be a fun one on these really nuanced and clarity focused burr sets. So we're going to get ourselves 18 grams. Remember, give it a few sprays on this grinder because it's a little bit on the staticky side, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, and we'll grind it through. Of course, we're just going to follow just our standard espresso protocol, some WDT, a quick tap to settle the bed, a nice flat tamp, and we're off to the races. Overall, pretty happy with the general grind so far. No major hiccups, no channels, just a nice, smooth, clean shot. So, can't really ask for much more straight out of the box on a grinder. I'm sure many of you might ask me about seasoning, and personally, I don't really buy into the whole you have to use, multiple pounds or kilograms of coffee to properly season burrs, or even believe in seasoning in general. I think it's important to run some dark roast through to just make sure everything is functioning smoothly. You get things a little bit oiled up and stuff like that, then give it a nice clean, and then it runs pretty great in my opinion. But of course, that's my hot take of the video. I did run about 12 ounces of dark roast I got at Trader Joe's through before I did this. And the shots it was making, and this shot specifically, delicious, clean, no problem. All right, so now with all that preamble out of the way, let's get into my first impressions from the unboxing and first preliminary testing experiences. And I think to start, I want to go over the things that maybe I was a little disappointed with, a little maybe bothered by, and things that were just generally underwhelming. And the first thing that really pops into my mind through the unboxing process was just how cheap the foam inside the Pelican case felt, at least that top layer of foam. It sort of is loose and doesn't really quite feel as high quality as it looked in the still photos I'd seen before, and it sort of betrays the bespoke high-end feel of the package overall. And that same feeling sort of translates also into the fact that the grinder really wasn't cleaned prior to shipping. Of course, I expect them to test it out with coffee, but a quick courtesy brush out, in my opinion, is a must. And it's not like I was gifted this grinder or it was loaned to me, someone else used it prior and maybe shipped it direct from their house to mine, but instead I bought this grinder. I paid $1,500 for the grinder, and it to show up with someone else's coffee in it is just not great. Another surprise to me was the motor noise. Now, I didn't really have major expectations in terms of that department, but in my mind, I sort of imagined something akin to the Lagome P64, which is a whisper quiet 300-watt motor. But the Zerno's 300-watt motor is quite a bit louder by comparison. Though I think at this point it should be said, I'm not really saying anything about the motor's performance or reliability, at least not yet. On that note, the motor does spin the burrs at a flat 900 RPM, but the medium feed pre-breaker does really slow the feed and subsequent grinding down quite a bit, resulting in roughly 1 gram every 3 seconds, at least on espresso settings. Now that isn't necessarily a bad thing, and I did also get the optional slow feed auger, which I haven't used yet. But the slow speed on the medium speed stock auger was just something I hadn't anticipated. On the topic of grinding, I also was surprised at the amount of static it creates. It of course comes with an RDT bottle, but it seems to need about twice as many sprays as I usually do, and ensuring the whole dose is saturated to avoid that tail end spray of static particles. The grinder feels very nice, very sturdy. The parts and pieces are superbly machined and finished, and I haven't felt any burrs, rough spots, or sharp corners. And I'm sure, like most things, this is subjective, but it is a very clean, industrial, but nice-looking piece of coffee kit, and I think it looks great on the bar. And finally, the coffees I brewed on the Zerno, which granted aren't really all that many as of yet, and I have used only one set of burrs, the only set I ordered with the grinder, the blind set of SSP multi-purposes, have been very tasty. And as expected, coming from a regular user of the non-blind set of these same burrs on my P64. And the shots themselves have been very flavorful, clear, bright, just what I would want from a single origin or an espresso that's going to be pulled in a longer shot. And with that said, now shifting gears back to my staunch realism, I can't say that this grinder has opened up any sort of new flavor horizons or anything like that. But of course, that really shouldn't be any of our expectations with a new grinder. But what it does do with the pre-breaker options and the ability to use both blind and standard burrs, its relatively low retention with RDT, of course, it does offer functionalities that no other grinder I've seen or am aware of thus far does. So for that alone, I definitely am impressed with the Zerno Z1, and also very curious to see what it can do in experiencing more coffees, more brew methods, more ratios, more burrs, and kind of seeing how it sort of settles into a daily grinder lifestyle. But on that note, I think it's time I start wrapping this one up, and as always, pass the conversation on to you. So what are your thoughts on the Zerno Z1? Do you think that there is a feature or features that make this grinder game-changing, or are you on the other side that think that this is just another industry sweetheart, another flavor of the month grinder that will just be forgotten once the next thing comes out? So drop your answers to those questions and any others you may have in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see y'all in the next video. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications when new videos drop. Check out my Instagram at Sprometheus for more coffee content. Help support the channel by considering becoming a member for unique exclusive perks. And as always, stay caffeinated. Pony Boy.